How is everyone? Thanks for coming tonight. This is, as you know, our final session for this semester, and we have, to make it particularly wonderful, we have 3 speakers, not just 1 speaker. I'm Klaus Lauers, I'm the Richard M. Krasno Distinguished Professor of History and International Affairs here at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. As this is our final event, I would like to tell you that it is your final chance to get onto my mailing list. So if you haven't signed up, then please sign up your name and your email address, and we will put you on our electronic mailing list. We also have a website, as you know, krasnoevents.com. There's a contact form, so if you do miss the chance to get on the mailing list here, you can always sign up by this contact form. And of course, our website will inform you about our forthcoming events next semester. We'll probably start again in late January or early February, and I'm working on the program right now, so I can't really tell you what is coming up. But what I can tell you is that it will be most exciting events. So please bear with me. I would also like to mention our YouTube channel again. While we are on vacation, so to speak, on holiday, while we enjoy Christmas and the New Year, you can always go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/KrasnoUNC, the one word, and you can watch all our videos of our many speakers this semester and in previous semesters. And we also have a 5-minute insight series where I afterwards interview all our speakers for 5 or 10 minutes to give you the gist of their talk here in 5 to 10 minutes. So please look at our YouTube channel and perhaps you'll like it. Right now, I checked before, we have 975 subscribers. And these are all serious subscribers. That's pretty good, I think, but I would love to come to 1,000 by the end of the evening. So if you have a laptop with you or a phone, then please sign up while you are sitting in this room. We need more subscribers to our video channel. Recently, as you know, relations between Russia and Ukraine have flared up again. This is still a very dangerous part of the world, but a world very far away in the Pacific, in Southeast Asia and the neighboring area, also that is a potentially very dangerous part of the world still. You have superpowers and great powers which are competing with each other for influence, for resources. Think China, think Japan, think the United States, also Korea and India, for example. And I think that is the theme and topic of our evening tonight, that we will discuss that very complex relationship between countries such as China and Japan, the United States, and the 2 Koreas. And I think our 3 speakers who have come from China, from Japan, from the United States, will enlighten us and tell us a little bit more about that very complex area of the world. Our first speaker will be Emma Chanlett-Avery, and Emma is a specialist in Asian affairs. She focuses in particular on Korea, on Thailand, on Singapore as well, and she is a specialist at the Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. If you don't know what the Congressional Research Service is, that is a part of Congress which is responsible for providing House members and senators with research advice in international relations, about giving them advice what is happening in the world. Often they are being asked by members of Congress to provide them with information, or sometimes they also write up reports themselves on their own initiative. But I'm sure if you have questions, Emma can give you more information than I can. Emma also had a stint at the State Department, and she also had a stint at the Joint Military Advisory Group in Bangkok. It is great to have Emma here tonight. Then our speaker is Tai Mibe. He is a distinguished Japanese diplomat, and he is now a visiting fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. He is particularly also a Korean expert. He speaks fluent Korean, I understand. And he worked also at the Japanese embassy in Beijing as a minister in between 2015 and 2017. And he has been in the United States since August 2017. He has a very distinguished career. He has had many diplomatic positions, particularly dealing with nuclear events and economic issues. There are too many to list them all here. A more detailed CV can be found on the website I mentioned to you before. He also was involved in the 6 party talks with North Korea between 2002 and 2005 and made quite a few visits to Pyongyang in the process. He also has dealt, and that was one of his particular specialities, he also has dealt with the issue of the abduction of Japanese citizens by North Korea, and that is of course an issue which is still concerning us. Then we have here our third speaker, Professor Xiao. Professor Ren is from Fudan University in Shanghai, and Fudan University is one of the leading universities in China. He specializes, is a professor in international politics, and he's the director of the Center for Chinese Foreign Policy. He particularly looks at American, Chinese foreign policy and international relations and security policy more generally. He has published in many prestigious international journals, has held many fellowships all over the world, and it's great to have him here today. What we would like to do today is that each of our 3 speakers will give a short presentation of between 10 and 15 minutes about one aspect of our topics today. And then we will convene here on stage, and I will pepper them with a few challenging questions. We will interrogate them a little bit, and then we'll open it up to you, the audience, and you can ask as many challenging questions as you like. And of course, as always, I would like to encourage you to ask many, many interesting questions. And as always, students are also allowed to ask questions. So let me begin with Emma Chanlett-Avery.
Thank you so much for having me here and for coming out on such a cold night. As was mentioned, I'm a specialist of Asian affairs at the Congressional Research Service. We provide nonpartisan research and analysis to members of Congress. We're sort of fighting the good fight for facts these days in Washington. But I'm here in my own personal capacity, so the views that I express on my own, they certainly don't represent the views of the federal government, and certainly not of any of the 535 members of Congress either. Also, a special thanks for having me here in Chapel Hill. I am not an alum, but I have deep family roots here. My grandfather was a professor here. My father grew up here. I have been a Tar Heel fan since I was a wee child, so it's especially exciting for me to be here. The title of this is rather bold: the U.S., China, Japan, Korea strategic competition and cooperation. So I'm just going to limit my remarks to talking about a couple of the sides of that square. Obviously, there are tremendously complex geopolitical dimensions of all these relationships. But for me, I'm going to focus mostly on the Korean Peninsula and on Japan, which was where the bulk of my research is for Congress. And particularly on the North Korea question, issue, crisis, whatever you want to call it, because that is sort of the most immediate concern and certainly has dominated my work, because I respond to requests from Congress. Suddenly, when this became front news, front headlines in the Trump administration, we were getting bombarded with questions. Generally, the questions that we answer are, House Foreign Affairs Committee, Senate Armed Services Committee, those are sort of our bread and butter, but suddenly we had everyone in Congress needing to have some sort of an opinion on North Korea, so that's what I've mostly worked on over the last 18 months or so. I'm also going to talk just briefly, put in context where I think the state of our alliances, our bilateral alliances with South Korea and Japan, and also talk a bit about the tension in South Korea and Japan relations, which is generally constant, but I think it is spiking right now, and I'll say a few words about that, and we'll welcome your questions afterwards. Obviously in North Korea, we've sort of whiplashed between the fire and fury, imminent invasion, little rocket man stage of things to grand international summits and proclamations of respect and love between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. We, I think, have stalled a bit in the process right now, if you're following what the bureaucracies are doing. This is not surprising, given that there was very little preparation that led up to the Singapore summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Usually when you have a leader summit, there are months and months and months of preparation and papers worked out, and you just get to the summit and then the leaders sign it. That was not at all how the Singapore summit came about. This was very much leader-centric. So we have sort of an abundance of symmetry going on, not just between Trump and Kim Jong-un, but of course Kim Jong-un has also met with President Xi of China 3 times, I believe. He has met with Moon Jae-in 3 times. So we have a foreign policy right now that is very much focused on the personalities and the idiosyncrasies, we could say, of the leaders at the top. And I actually give Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in great credit for grasping that very quickly, realizing that if they were going to get something done with the United States under this administration, they were going right to the White House and right to Trump himself, which is certainly unconventional in terms of how we usually conduct international diplomacy. So right now we are a bit stalled. There's no particular roadmap ahead. We keep forming new working groups and scheduling meetings that the North Koreans sometimes cancel on. However, I do expect for this to pick back up, and the reason I say that, this is just my take on it right now. I think that Kim Jong-un right now recognizes he has a unique opportunity, and it is very particular to this moment. He has restored his relations with China. North Korea-China relations were at a real low point just last year, with China being willing to sign on to UN Security Council resolutions that put very tight sanctions on North Korea. But once Trump announced that he wanted to have a summit, the first thing that Kim Jong-un did was get on the train and go to Beijing and restore that relationship. That was the first time he had ever left the country, actually, as leaders. We knew very little about him before then. He has a government in South Korea that is in the progressive tradition, which is very eager to engage, and the South Koreans certainly are doing all that they can to restore some cooperative relations with North Korea. And he probably realizes that he's not going to get a better deal from the United States than he has right now, whatever that deal may be. We have a commander-in-chief now who really likes to strike the big deal and to make historic pronouncements, and I think Kim Jong-un has recognized that. He has a chance now to deal with some of North Korea's existential problems, and that is the military threat from the United States, as well as getting some sanctions relief so that he can develop his economy. He is a young man. He probably thinks that he is going to be in power for several more decades possibly, and realizes that he needs to be able to show his people that he can grow the economy. So I think we are now at sort of a new normal again. We're not going to war tomorrow, which seemed like it was really a threat just about a year ago. But we still have a stalling sort of process in terms of actually getting to concrete results. I'm happy to talk about, if we want to, later on in the session, if the political shift in the United States, basically the Democrats taking back the House, will make any difference in Korea policy, but I won't go into that right now to keep my remarks limited. I'd also like to talk a bit about our alliances right now. I think that the U.S.-South Korean alliance, while we are saying over and over again publicly that we are on the same page, I think that it is showing some strains. I think it is definitely taking some hits in this process. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we have a president who is openly skeptical about the value of bilateral alliances and says that the United States is not getting a good deal. This happens to be when something called the Special Measures Agreement, this is going to sound very Washington bureaucratic, but basically the burden-sharing arrangement between the South Korea and the United States is being negotiated right now. It expires at the end of this year. Apparently negotiations are very difficult. The United States is asking for a lot. These are always contentious negotiations, but it is a particularly difficult time when Trump has come into office promising to press our allies to give more. And as far as I've heard, we have achieved no breakthroughs. Admittedly, over Thanksgiving break, I wasn't paying as close attention, but I'm pretty sure there were no breakthroughs during that time. There are also, President Trump at the Singapore summit unilaterally decided to cancel bilateral military exercises between the United States and South Korea. And these are sort of the bread and butter of how alliances work, is exercising together. So those have been called off. We don't know when they'll be restored. There have been recent North-South agreements on military-to-military relations that, to some defense experts, puts the United States at somewhat of a disadvantage, that they have been imbalanced in nature. We've taken away some guard posts in the demilitarized zone. There are some maritime buffer areas where we can't exercise, some no-fly zones. And this, to some who are used to thinking about threats from North Korea, feel like we do not have eyes on North Korea, and that makes the U.S. forces and South Korea more vulnerable to some sort of surprise attack. In terms of the Japan alliance, again, we are all saying we are on the same page, but Japan is always anxious about abandonment and about U.S. staying power in the region. And again, we had at least candidate Trump talking about how we were getting a raw deal, and he was distrustful of these alliances and of the Japanese. Well, again, at the leader level, Trump and Abe have had some warm atmospherics. Japan's concerns, particularly in terms of the Korean Peninsula, are being somewhat marginalized in this process. They have deep concerns about the Japanese citizens that were abducted decades ago by North Korean agents. Those have not really been addressed in this summitry. They obviously face a lot of threats from DPRK's ballistic missile capabilities and some of their other conventional capabilities. So Japan feels somewhat left out of this process. The Trump administration has also now launched a bilateral trade negotiation with Japan, which could include autos, which is deeply worrying to Japan, after, of course, the United States pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that Japan had really banked a lot, or particularly Abe had banked a lot of his political capital in. I also think that Japan is hedging a bit by reaching out to China, trying to restore that relationship. I think there's deep tension and, again, sort of existential concern about China's rise, but I think they're looking to stabilize things at least while they see which direction the United States is going in. And then just briefly, I'll talk about Japan-South Korea relations. This is a relationship that has always been peppered with concerns, deep concerns about historical issues, South Korean grievances about the period that Japan annexed the Korean Peninsula. Even when Japan and South Korea reach some agreement that seems to stabilize the relationship, those tensions always tend to be bubbling underneath the surface. And we've seen those come up again with, it seems, basically the shuttering of the foundation that was dedicated to dealing with the so-called comfort women issue, as well as a South Korean Supreme Court case that allowed South Korean laborers to sue Japanese companies. This has hamstrung that relationship, even if the two leaders did want to get along. And I see Japan coming out sort of the short end right now of regional diplomacy because their concerns are not being sufficiently addressed, at least according to the Japanese. So I'll stop there. I know that's a lot of information. I'm used to giving briefings to members of Congress and staff where you have about 10 minutes before the next vote. So I welcome questions to expand on any of those. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to be at a prestigious university. This year is an important anniversary for China. It is the 40th anniversary of the initiation of China's reform and opening up. Over the past 4 decades, our country has changed greatly. Today, in China are living, are enjoying a higher living standard. As many as 700 million people have been lifted out of poverty. They have freedom to choose their jobs, to choose where to live, things like that. 40 years ago, China was a very closed country. And today, it is increasingly integrated into the world. For the drive to economic modernization, a peaceful external environment is obviously key to the success of economic development. For the past years, China tried to build with success a benign external environment. And no doubt, the United States and Japan are an important part of such an external environment. 40 years ago, Mr. Deng Xiaoping visited Japan in 1978, and he was deeply impressed by what he saw in Japan. For example, he rode on Shinkansen, Japan's high-speed train, and he realized that China was lagging behind. And that was something behind his decision, his ideas for reform and opening up. A few months later, China and the United States formally established a diplomatic relationship. And over the past 4 decades, the relationship between the United States and China have grown to a great degree in all areas, as we know. And this tremendous growth of China-U.S. relationship has been mutually beneficial. If it is not mutually beneficial, the relationship cannot last for 40 years. And it is also a complex relationship. Its complexity defies any single term to characterize this relationship. During the Bush administration, people found that, well, President Bush had to use the word complex to characterize the relationship. And during this current Trump administration, they emphasize competition between the two countries. Its National Security Strategy Report, which was released last December, argues that great power competition returned. In September, one National Security Council Senior Director for Asian Affairs, Matt Pottinger, appeared at the our National Day reception sponsored by our embassy in Washington. And he used the word competition to characterize the relationship in a clear way and frank way, calling at the meantime saying that competition does not necessarily lead to hostility, or competition may not necessarily be bad for the relationship. And one more worrisome development was on the 4th of October, Vice President Pence gave a China policy speech at the Hudson Institute, in which there are quite a few accusations about China. And of course, there are other frictions, such as trade friction, as everybody knows. While it is true that competition does exist between the United States and China, it is not very happy to highlight this aspect to such a degree. So I'm actually quite frustrated to see the most recent developments of the China-U.S. relationship. We have to have a more balanced viewpoint about the relationship. In fact, the two countries are working together in many areas in world affairs, and we have to avoid self-fulfilling prophecy. Between China and Japan, this year is the 40th anniversary of the signing of the Peace and Friendship Treaty, which happened in 1978. The relationship between China and Japan has also experienced a lot of ups and downs. In the meantime, we have also seen a tremendous growth of the relationship. Well, just look at how many flights every day between the two countries. It is easy to see the growth of the relationship. For Japan, this year is the 150th anniversary of the Meiji Restoration, which turned Japan into Asia's first industrialized country. After that, for many years, Japan looked down upon other Asian countries, including China. But when China has become the world's second largest economy, Japan has a big question that it has to adapt to a new reality. Japan may be experiencing a period of to adapt to such a new reality or environment. In the meantime, the relationship is fragile, so to speak. For example, in September 2010, when a Chinese trawler rammed into a Japan Coast Guard boat in the sea surrounding what Japan calls Senkaku and China calls Diaoyu Islands. It quickly became a crisis between the two. A crisis that should have been avoided if the two countries handled such an incident better. And 2 years later, in 2012, Japan announced that it decided to nationalize the islands. A more serious crisis broke out between the two countries, and sank the relationship to the lowest point since the normalization of the relationship. At a time when the two countries were supposed to celebrate a 40th anniversary of normalization of relationship in 2012. As it turned out, a crisis like that sank the relationship to the lowest point. Over 6 years after that, there was no exchange of state visit between Japan and China. And that was quite abnormal for two mutually important neighboring countries. I guess I should not use too much time. But the leaders of the two countries, they did meet, but they only met during the multilateral settings. When for example, at APEC meeting and G20 summit. Last month, Prime Minister Abe of Japan came to China for a state visit after a quite 6 or 7 years, and it was announced that the relationship has been back on track, and that was a positive development for the two countries. Well, I guess the bottom line for these great powers is that we all want peace, and we all want avoidance of conflict between or among us. Based on that bottom line, we have to try to manage these complex relationships, and we cannot afford a failure. Given that the world's 3 largest economies, if they cannot manage their relationship well, what would happen? And for example, every country is closely following the trade frictions between U.S. and China, because the changes in that relationship will affect their own countries. It is easy to blame others, and no one is perfect. As a moderate voice in China, I often encourage our policymakers to rethink some of our policies or practices. And I don't want our country to be feared by others. China is growing, and this has triggered some worries in some countries. And maybe we can do a better job in the years ahead. For example, the Belt and Road Initiative, and in South China Sea, for example, perhaps we should have rethought some of the things that we have done. So I think we should improve, and we need more dialogues. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much, Professor Lord. It's a great honor to be here as a speaker. And I always feel really awkward. I have to say this when I speak at a public occasion. Please note that although I am from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, and I am currently institutionally belong to the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C., today I am here as a visiting senior fellow of the Atlantic Council. And what I said here today does not represent the views of the government of Japan by any means. But I am really relieved to see that Emma-san mentioned the same waiver when she talked. And Professor Lawrence gave me many themes, subjects in advance, but rather than covering and interpreting all of these individual phenomena in East Asia, which I can discuss later in the Q&A session, I'd like to talk about my personal views over how we should see the current situation and how we should approach it, and mostly regarding the China or the U.S.-China relations. Today's main subject, I suppose, the U.S.-China, Japan, and Korea relationship. I believe this is the timeliest theme, and U.S.-China relations are particularly in the midst of the turbulence regarding the economy and trade. And as discussed on October 4th, Vice President Pence gave a very tough and comprehensive speech on China. And meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister visited Beijing and met with his Chinese counterparts on October 26th. The first official bilateral visit of Japan's political leader in 7 years. China is the most important theme when you discuss the future of East Asia and the world. The national relations in the region in the past more than a decade can be characterized by an increasingly assertive China and the responses to it by the neighboring countries and international community. How to deal with China will continue to be the hardest challenge in the region as well as the world in the years or even decades to come. In the past years, China took a series of actions challenge to the status quo, including those in East China Sea and South China Sea, which are fully covered by Vice President's speech. However, no matter how inconvenient and uncomfortable to you, China just adheres to what it believes to be in its own interest. They believe they have necessity, power, and legitimacy to do so. They believe that in the last 2 centuries, they had to suffer from Western aggression and superiority because they were weak. Under this belief, since the establishment of the state, in particular after adopting the reform and opening policy, China has devoted time and energy to cultivate its power. And now, they believe they have the power and want influence and respect that they believe their power deserves. The U.S. calls such China as a competitor. So do I. When China acts in accordance with what it believes to be in its interest, And when these actions bring about inconvenience and discomfort that are unbearable to the United States and its allies, competition is inevitable. Competition over economy, competition over influence. I know many Chinese people do not like to be called as a competitor, but this is the maximum respect paid by the United States to China. Eventually, the United States of America recognized the People's Republic of China as its competitor. This does not necessarily mean China was an enemy or an adversary, at least until very recently. On the other hand, China should be wrong to be called as a revisionist. Many experts still believe China has been one of the largest beneficiaries of the existing world order, but they started to suspect China might want to change it in its favor. And a series of China's actions have hardened America's view to the extent it merely sees China as an adversary. Formerly, China became overconfident and overexcited too early in the past years. And I sense that China is now recognizing it and in the process of adjusting their actions and performances. It seems that this adjustment was also reflected in the improvement of Japan-China relations this year. You can assume some factors that triggered China's adjustment. But I suppose Trump administration policy toward China, particularly its trade policy and bipartisan support for it in America, including the business community, could have had a significant impact in this regard. At the same time, the U.S. and Japan also need to be careful not to be overexcited on their side with China's adjustment. I don't mean we should not be satisfied with this degree of adjustment and should further push China. The opposite. I want to say we should give China time for learning and honorable adjustment. China's capability, its whether economic one or military one, will still continue to grow for many years to come. It is impossible to totally control this. Japan and the United States, as well as like-minded partners, need to cultivate their own capabilities, individually and collectively, to hedge and counter China's capability to be used against the interest of the U.S. and allies and partners, more specifically, to be used as a challenge to a rule-based international order. They need to demonstrate that China's action running against this order cannot be tolerated. As for capabilities, this is what should be done. However, things are different about the intentions. Intentions can change. We still can work on China's intention to make it more moderate. On this premise, I would like to emphasize that you should not jump to a conclusion about your counterpart's character, nature, and intention. When I listen to or read a foreign expert to discuss about Japan, I often feel some parts are right, but that's not everything. Maybe you would feel the same thing when you see foreign experts discuss about America. It's totally the same about China, too. Then what should we do? First of all, we need to maintain a communication. Whatever difficulties we might have, cutting communication will give you a real chance to improve the situation. I know in most cases, Chinese officials just read out the prepared text and make their counterparts feel like they are talking to a wall, which I believe is not good for China itself. Nevertheless, I would like to stress that you could make a difference even in such discussion or in communication on the sidelines of such meetings. Another important thing is to study and understand your counterpart at the micro level as an organism that consists of people and people's groups. We tend to think that China is a dictatorship by the Communist Party, and therefore the top leader and party control everything about the country's performance. However, Whatever regime a state has, it consists of people and people's groups. China is a country with 4,000 years of history and 1.4 billion people. It has its own character as a fabric made of history, culture, geography, and climate. If you are to effectively work on a country and influence it, you must understand its character. While working at the American think tank, I sometimes feel this sort of a micro-level study and understanding toward not only China, but most of foreign countries and regions is weakening. At least, such a study or understanding is rarely reflected in actual policy making. And eventually, we need to address the question of what space we are going to tolerate for China in the region and world. The way China seeks influence and respect has been mostly impetuous so far, and causing antipathy in the rest of the world. However, as far as the economy is concerned, China's desire for the international status that meets its power could and should be accommodated in some manner. In other words, we need to consider the range we can adjust the existing international order. Last year, the Atlantic Council issued a strategy for the Trans-Pacific century. It stated the foremost goal of strategy in Asia should be to continue pursuing objectives through the adaptation, revitalization, and defense of the updated rules-based international order in Asia. The order must evolve to fit the realities of changing domestic politics and the dynamic region. This does not mean compromising on key principles, but rather updating key pillars and integrating rising powers into an expanding order while making adjustments in government structure. The question is, how and which part of the status quo should be adapted, updated, adjusted, and evolved? The Atlantic Council strategy did not come up with a specific answer, but this is the major challenge we need to address in the years or even decades to come. China does not deny the concept of a rules-based order, but it asserts that the rules should be adapted, updated, adjusted, and evolved to reflect and accommodate its power it believes to be real, legitimate, and sustainable. There is no big principle that is applicable to the entire process of this exercise. We have to consider and discuss specifically area by area, event by event, while looking at the on-the-ground reality. This is not very exciting but complicated work. However, this is necessary and possible. And these exercises could even function as a sort of confidence building measures. For these exercises to be successful, however, I believe China has more to do. First of all, it should further promote the current adjustment. Above all, it needs to adjust its policies to the international standards in such areas as market access, intellectual property, competition, and aid. China should no longer use its status of a developing country as a shield to protect itself. As for intellectual property, China is now a producer rather than a consumer. For its own interest, China should move ahead with reforms to adjust its systems to the international standards, which will give legitimacy to its own power. I also would like to suggest that it would be China's interest to refrain from big words for the time being, such as China Dream, Community of Common Destiny, Made in China 2025, and taking center stage in the world. Only Belt and Road Initiative enough. Creating these slogans one after another might be for domestic consumption, but when they are mixed up, they just unnecessarily cause cautions in the rest of the world. China also should refrain from stressing it is a great power. That word. A real great power does not have to repeat it is a great power. Respect is not given to those who demand it. Many people, including the recent national security strategy, argue that major power competition is bad. Such competition existed throughout history. When a new power was emerging, when the equilibrium was moving, all stakeholders tried to secure as comfortable space as possible, and consequently caused conflicts, which sometimes even led to wars. Some people describe the current situation as a new Cold War, or on the brink of it. As we saw in the past, however, the Cold War deprived all players of massive resources, energy, and opportunities. I think it is right to describe the current situation as a competition, but it does not have to lead to a conflict, a new Cold War. And our objective there should not be to win the competition, but to mitigate it while ensuring that we do not lose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would you take a seat on the stage? Emma here to the left, Xiao to the middle, and you in the right.
Thank you very much again. That was very illuminating. Let me ask you a few questions about the trade war, the so-called, or the trade conflict, South China Sea, and perhaps the Belt and Road if you have time. So it has been argued, it has been said that the trade war is all about the attempt to contain China. Is there some validity in that? And whether yes or no, how can we overcome the trade war between two major powers in the world? Shall we start with you?
Defer to that one.
That's okay. Would you like to come in?
Well,
China does not want a trade war with any country. But when it is imposed by other country, it has to cope with it, right? According to a recent American Chamber of Commerce Shanghai report, over 60% of the respondents, meaning American companies in China, responded by saying that their biggest concern is they have a rising costs for their business. And I think there have been some costs or losses for American farmers as well. For example, the soybean growers. And there are higher costs or losses for Chinese companies, obviously.
So how can we overcome it?
Right. The question is, how are we going to handle this? One thing that is very interesting to watch is that our two presidents will meet in Argentina on the sidelines of the G20 summit this coming Saturday. It is interesting to watch if they can agree upon something to avoid the escalation of the trade war. If we could not avoid that, meaning the Trump administration's announced a step to raise the level of tariff from 10 to 25% will take effect on January the 1st. That meaning an escalation.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe you would like to comment.
Thank you very much. And as for the trade war, I do not know if it is a right word to describe the current situation. And actually, it is not only China. Japan or any other part of the world is not involved in this sort of new trade policy of this American administration. And we never describe this as a trade war between Japan and the United States. And Japan and the United States very recently agreed to start new negotiations over the trade.
How do you describe it? Like a storm in a teacup?
Maybe this could be America's new trade policy and a response of the other part of the world. Now, anyway, in case of China, I have some sympathy over China's situation because first of all, China is a tangible, number one economy next to the United States. So, U.S. Mr. Trump's the targeting the China, this energy and intensity is much bigger than the one to those to the other countries. And throughout recent experience of dealing with business with China, there are certain level of antipathy even in the business community of the United States, in particular with regard to the intellectual property, the theft of intellectual property, the forced transfer of these intellectual property things. So, as I discussed, this has some sort of bipartisan support in the United States, and certainly, since China is this much big existence in the world and the competitor for the United States, the trade policy could be placed in a much bigger picture of a China policy of the United States. So this is a little bit different feature of U.S.-China trade relationship. And I expect that the summit meeting in Argentina brings about some fruit.
So do you believe that word containment is appropriate or that is totally not applicable at all?
I would say, I don't think that U.S. current policy on China, not only the trade, but in other aspect of China policy can be described as a containment. But I am not sure, but U.S. is still in the process of crafting a policy, and considering how to place the trade policy, which is the major concern of the president himself, in the large picture of the entire the policy about China.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your sympathy toward China.
I'll just say a couple things briefly.
Yeah.
First, I agree with Mibai-san that from a congressional perspective at least, it used to be 10, 15 years ago, there was a sort of a built-in lobby for China because of the business community. And that really has changed. There's really widespread bipartisan concern about China's IPR practices, for example. And also on the security side, there's more and more concern about China's intentions and capabilities. The other thing I'll say is that for people who think that sometimes President Trump's foreign policy positions are sort of chaotic and random, his view of trade practices, particularly with Asian countries, has been very consistent since the 80s. When he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. So I wouldn't count on him, just turning this into another one of his transactional things. He's been very consistent on that point for many, many years.
So no giving in at the forthcoming summit with Xi Jinping?
I think this is one, tiny data point in the overall U.S.-China relationship. But it sort of depends on the last person that said something to him too, what's going to happen in that meeting. That doesn't mean that's what's going to actually translate into policy. I would say I'm concerned about the Japanese trade talks in some ways because while they tried to sort of relegate that to like this economic dialogue for a while, when the administration decided not to exempt Japan from the steel and aluminum tariffs that it did for some countries, I think that was a shot across the bow saying you really have to negotiate bilaterally with us. And Japan did not want to get into that bilateral negotiation.
Okay, thank you. I think we will probably talk more about the trade war in a minute when we open it up. But just let me ask you about the South China Sea that is also increasingly of concern to all the countries we are discussing here. But the South China Sea, the China, it's called China. Isn't China quite right to regard that as its backyard? And why should any other power be influential there? What would the U.S. say about that? Probably not much.
I have to say, actually, under the Trump administration, the South China Sea you do not hear nearly as much about. I mean, I think that, defense planners and PACOM and Indo-Pacific Command now are very concerned about it, have increased some of their presence there with FONOPS, and recently the Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier made a little show of force there too. But this has not been an emphasis at all coming from the White House, at least under this administration.
But there is concern.
There's definitely concern if you go down into the bureaucracy. We'll look at these things every day, of course.
Okay.
The South China Sea issue is very complex. China is a country which has more neighboring countries than any other country in the world. We have 14 neighboring countries on land that we share land borders with. And over the years, we used to have many land disputes with our neighboring countries. Over the many years, we have settled those disputes one by one. And today only two are remaining. They are the ones with India and Bhutan. So based on our experience, it is possible to solve a territorial dispute with a neighboring country in bilateral means, through bilateral means. The lawsuit, the Philippines came up a few years ago, was something that China was unfamiliar with. To solve a territorial issue through international arbitration. This is something that China was not accustomed to and was not familiar with. And in China's opinion, it was imposed by neighboring countries. So China decided not to participate and not to accept its ruling. So that was happening in 2016. After that, China-Philippines relationship was improved. China's relationship with some other countries have been improved. And China and ASEAN are negotiating a code of conduct for China, South China Sea. So generally speaking, the tensions have been cooled down. Countries cannot find a solution in a tense situation. So I think generally speaking, that's a positive for this issue.
Thank you. Maybe we should move on to a topic where China and the United States don't disagree but largely agree. That is the North Korea problem. Both countries believe North Korea should be denuclearized. It should not be a nuclear power. But still cooperation is, despite that fundamental agreement, cooperation between the United States and China about the North Korea problem is still not easy. So what can we do to improve that?
North Korean issue, I also spent 3 years in Beijing to watch the Beijing performance of the North Korean issue. And at the time, of course, I did not see what we observed this year. A lot of reconciliation between North Korea and with China, South Korea, and the United States. My sense was that, particularly when tension is very high, for China, the North Korean issue is a part of the U.S.-China relations, which means China's priority is stability, frankly speaking. So that they do not want the United States to take a military action against North Korea, which could lead to a massive influx of refugees across the border from the North Korean side to China, and any other not very negative impact could be assumed. And so as long as the tension is very high, in order to control the United States, China did the maximum cooperation to the United States, including the United Nations Security Council resolutions. But now, we are seeing the reconciliation, inter-Korean reconciliation, and even the U.S. DPRK summit meeting. So that lifted, the very heavy weight that had been imposed on China, and that is now, why the China, made a very, quick 3 rounds of the summit meetings, with North Korea in a complex time frame. So I suppose that, as for the democratization, the U.S. and China would continue to share the same goals, but to what extent China would press North Korea to see the quick outcome of democratization, I don't think that it is China's priority.
Thank you. Emma.
I think I basically agree with that. I mean, fundamentally, China has not shifted its overall strategic goal in terms of the Korean Peninsula, which is stability. They do not want a flood of refugees coming over the border. They do not want North Korea to continue a string of provocations, which gives the United States justification for building up its missile defense, for example. I think they would prefer that North Korea is not nuclearized, but the biggest threat to them is a crisis and tension there. I think that China has come, just in the last year and a half, to a better understanding of Kim Jong-un, too. They were not comfortable with him when he became leader. They were much more familiar with and knew his father, Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un, as part of his consolidation of power at the top of his regime, executed his uncle, who was the main interlocutor with China, as well as many of the other senior officials surrounding him. So that was that made Beijing very uneasy, which is why they were willing to sign on to these increasingly severe sanctions. But they always watered down the sanctions first. They do not want North Korea to collapse, because that would be potentially putting a U.S.-aligned a united Korean Peninsula up against its border, which is not in their interest.
So you're saying that the nuclear issue is more pressing for the United States than it is for China?
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in general. The Korean nuclear problem is another challenging and difficult issue. For North Korea, they feel that they have a serious security threat to them. We have to understand the psyche and the nature of the issue. If I were Kim Jong-un, I need this weapon to defend myself. And if the outside world want me to disarm myself, I have to be given a reason to disarm myself. So what we need to do is challenging for us all. What we need to do, the outside world needs to do, is to give Kim Jong-un the reason to give up the nuclear program and weapon. we should do more in that.
Right. Thank you. I'm sure we will debate that. My very quick final question, Belt and Road. Is that really an economic program to spread infrastructure and make China economically more export more, or is it largely a geopolitical issue? Is it a way for China to spread its geopolitical influence abroad? And you know that this has been controversially discussed. Quick answer before we open it. Maybe we'll start with the Japanese expert.
China never recognized and acknowledged that it is some such a political attempt. So
Is what, sir?
China it does not does never acknowledge it as a geopolitical attempt.
And you believe that?
And from our perspective, as we see now, when you look at the realities, for example, the very famous case is that as the port of Hambantota, Sri Lanka, where the Sri Lanka was in huge debt, and they had to give that port to be used by China the 99 years like that. So, and of course, China could come up with any explanation about this original. Anyway, from the perspective of the rest of the world, and particularly the United States or its allies and partners, and this sort of attempt could be recognized one of the series of how can I say that securing other points where the China can strategically use alongside the coastline of the Indo-Pacific Ocean.
Thank you. So geopolitics is definitely up in the Chinese mind, you argue. Would you agree?
I agree that that's part of it. It's also, though, there is, frankly, a need for infrastructure development in this part of the world, and the United States has responded somewhat. The BUILD Act was just passed out of Congress, which is an attempt to address this. But there's no denying that China is willing to put up a lot of the capital in order to do this, but I think it's goes sort of, it dovetails well with its geopolitical ambitions in the region as well.
Okay, thank you. What do you think?
I think that's a great question. What is Belt and Road really is? I have to disagree to the view arguing that it is a political project. I would argue that Belt and Road is a development program. It is an idea to seek development together with other countries. Today, China has some capability and economic resources to provide to other countries, for example. So, the nature of Belt and Road Initiative, Belt and Road is by nature a development program. China hopes to achieve together with other countries. I actually not very happy with the whole Belt and Road initiative or idea. I think it's basically about projects. So let's do projects one by one, and we don't have to need an overall like a big blueprint like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this has given us enough food for thought and certainly enough food for your questions. So please raise your hand and let me know who you would like to address the question to. This gentleman right at the end there to the left.
This question would be more...
Hold on, the microphone is coming. Yeah, who of the speakers you would like the question to address to?
Good evening, everyone. This question would be more to Professor Ren. You had mentioned some of China's goals in terms of North Korea. However, going off a report of the Congressional Research Office, China is North Korea's biggest trading partner, accounting for almost 90% of their imports. Bilateral trades increased steadily over the past decade and a half. China also supplies the vast majority of aid to the North Korean capital. China seems to be in the prime position to basically get North Korea to denuclearize quicker than any other nation could by imposing sanctions. Basically, the collective power of the UN pales in comparison to the bargaining power that China has with North Korea. So is China doing enough to actually further the goal of denuclearization?
Well, there's no doubt that China wants to see a denuclearized Korean Peninsula, right? I think we all agree to that. The question for us is how to achieve that. And this has, well, the problem has been there for more than 20 years. And there have been a lot of discussions and so on. Last year, the situation was so tense when North Korea went ahead with more nuclear tests and ICBM tests, and there were gossips about the possible U.S. military action against it, things like that. What China did last year was joining other Security Council members, joining other countries to for further sanctions against North Korea. And those new sanction measures, I believe, did have an impact on North Korea. So I think that was one of the reasons why Kim Jong-un wanted to change. If we had followed him, followed North Korea, starting from his New Year message, and then the Winter Olympics, he sent delegations, people, his envoys, and then his some meetings with President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. And unprecedentedly, he paid 3 visits to China in less than 3 months. He paid 3 visits to China to meet with President Xi Jinping, which was unprecedented. So I believe he wants to change, but he's not sure of especially the United States. So he's hesitating. He's watching by doing these summits with U.S., South Korea, and likely China and Russia as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, each of you. My question is for Mr. Ibe, and since taking office,
Can you take the microphone a bit closer, or is it not?
Is that working?
Yeah.
it's good. Okay, I'm sorry. Since taking office, President Trump's administration has had frayed relations with our traditional allies in Europe, and especially our NATO allies under Section 5 of the treaty. And I just wonder if that's had an impact in your part of the world and in your country in particular. And does Japan have confidence in America's obligations in terms of defense?
First of all, I am not now in the position to interpret about the current Japan's position. But anyway, of course, the government of Japan has been taking a close look at what the U.S. is doing with NATO and Europe, on alliance issues, and because it could have a significant impact on the U.S.-Japan alliances. But my sense is that so far, Japan is not that much significantly worried about the U.S. commitment on the alliance. So Mr. Abe still keeps a very good friendship relationship with Mr. Trump, and of course, there is a trade issue. But since Japan highly valued this alliance, that's why Mr. Abe, although his original strategy is to take America back to the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, but he also decided to get into the bilateral negotiation over the trade agreement, which means that Japan does not think that they do not have to do anything to keep the alliance. So they are doing their best.
Well, the Prime Minister of Japan was one of the first visitors to Trump Towers after Trump's election. And, well, the first, you're right. And he was very proud of that, and he was one of the first who met with him after he actually Trump moved into the Oval Office. So I think Japan has really tried to nourish the relationship with the Trump administration, but tariffs were still imposed on Japan. Unlike the tariffs of the Europeans, they were also not lifted. Hasn't that led to a lot of disappointment and frustration, and also worries whether the United States is as reliable in defense matters and foreign policy matters as in the past? But can that explain why the Prime Minister went perhaps to Beijing to, also get onto the good sides of the Chinese government?
As for the Japan-China recent summit meetings, to be fair, I cannot think that was triggered by the recent Trump administration's posture towards Japan, because even when I was in Beijing, Japan was eager to have summit meetings. It was the Chinese side insisting that the time is not mature, the environment is not good. So the Japanese side, the basic position is that even though we have difficulties or differences or problems, it is a good thing that we have high-level meetings. The more we have differences, the more we have a necessity to talk. And so, I don't know, I'm not sure about the Chinese reason, but on the Japanese side, I don't say that this was triggered by America.
Okay.
I actually think that Japan, and under Prime Minister Abe's leadership particularly, has really been aggressive in reaching out to other power centers because of their concern about U.S. staying power. This is not particular to the Trump administration necessarily. Japan's been concerned for a while that the United States cannot play that protective role for them. So I think that they do want to stabilize this relationship with China. I think that Xi Jinping passed all of his major elections, and the various transitions in place there, also wants to stabilize until they see what the United States is going to do. Abe has also been very aggressive in pursuing Putin and resolving some of their territorial disputes, formally ending World War II between those two countries. He's also reached out to India fairly aggressively and tried to nourish that relationship. So I think that he actually has been with an eye on the United States commitment. He would like to nourish that alliance and recognizes that that is the main pillar of Japan's security, but it's also, I think, hedging a bit and reaching out to other sectors.
But reaching out to other countries is not a bad thing in principle, is it? So can we be thankful for Trump that other countries have begun to reach out to other countries?
That's one way to look at it.
Let me ask you, Professor Ren, is China trying to divide the United States from its allies, be it Japan, be it the Europeans? Do the Chinese think it would be a good idea if the alliance relationships the United States has all over the world was a little loosened up?
Well, I don't think we can divide U.S. and its allies. I think a better word for that is partnership. I think for many years, a lesson that we learn from our own experience with other countries. We formed an alliance with Soviet Union, and we all know what happened later. We formed alliance with some other countries. Has not been very constructive. And we have found out that it is more constructive to form partnerships with other countries. And I think that is very important to understand China's foreign policy.
Okay. Any more questions? This gentleman here. Yeah.
Good evening, thank you for coming. I have questions for Professor Ren. Reference to One Belt, One Road, and China's military capabilities, do you foresee, particularly their naval capabilities and expansion of naval capabilities and desire for overseas basing, i.e. in Djibouti as a necessary byproduct of One Belt, One Road?
Well, One Belt, One Road is not everything. I always criticize that by saying that the Belt and Road is not a basket that you can put everything in. You mentioned the new base in Djibouti. Well, that started from the rampant private pirate activities in the Gulf of Aden, right? And the U.S. Security Council passed the resolution. And then China sent its warships to the region, to the seas. And what happened later was that China and Djibouti reached an agreement to create a base that can provide materials, provisions, logistics to its warships, right? And so it's how significant is this? I think we can have different assessments, but does that mean an expansionist China policy? I don't think so.
Thank you. Any more questions? Students are also allowed to ask us. Yeah, over there, Sarah.
This question is for Professor Ren. First, I want to thank you for your nice talk and discussions, good discussions so far. My question is, what do you think will be the political and economical challenge for China in the next few decades? to continue to grow?
I think we have many challenges in the years ahead. We are such a big country, 1.3 billion people, aging society, for example. We have many challenges to deal with. But based on the experience of reform and opening up the past 40 years, I think we have the confidence to overcome all those challenges and issues, to turn our country, I think that the goal has been set, to turn our country into a prosperous, democratic, harmonious country by the mid-century.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, Brian first, yeah? Can you have the microphone?
Thank you. Thank you for the talks. Mr. Mibe, we hear a lot about President Abe, Prime Minister Abe going diplomatic relations and extending them. How are those relations going with South Korea? Because there's been a long history of difficulties with South Korea. And then the other question would be, where is the North Korea-South Korea relationship? How's that going to develop given this new world we're looking at?
Thank you. Let's start with you.
To be short, as for Japan, South Korea relations, very recently, South Korea came up with a very two consecutive heavy decisions over the one was over the labor forces who used to work in Japan, and one was dissolving the foundation on the company woman. And both of them are, the first one was the denial of the legal foundation which was established when we normalized the relationship with South Korea in 1965. And so there is now a very serious view over the South Korea, and maybe it is premature to predict what's going to happen. But as far as I know, Japan's position is that we are waiting the South Korean side to come up with the reasonable solution. On the comfortable issue is that many people know that in December of 2015, both governments agreed upon some arrangement. But after the administrative change in South Korea, the new administration said that they cannot live up with this agreement, and so this is also the thing that we are seeing a sort of denial of the previous arrangement. So the basic position, as far as I know, the government of Japan is now to wait and see what reasonable solution North Korea come up with.
Emma, regarding North Korea and South Korea.
Well, North-South relations are actually going quite swimmingly these days. Actually, I think, faster than a lot of Americans would prefer. President Moon comes from the sunshine, the so-called sunshine policy tradition of engagement, so now we can call it moonshine, I guess. And he, his basic platform has always been to reach out to the North, to engage economically with the North, to build trust with the North. I actually think that President Trump's initial hostile rhetoric and threatening to employ the military option of North Korea gave Moon the space to pursue that more aggressively than he would have been able to otherwise. So he has, set up, taken moves to set up a liaison office. I think that the South Koreans would love to reopen the Kaesong industrial complex. which was an important pillar of inter-Korean cooperation before. So that's going well, and Moon has been very successful in using this diplomacy, utilizing the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, for example, in order to push this diplomacy forward. In terms of Japan, just briefly, traditionally when North Korea is behaving poorly, that's given a great reason for South Korea, Japan, and the United States to cooperate. It gets trickier when North Korea is actually reaching out. And I think that Japan is very distrustful of Moon's outreach to the North, thinks that he's going too quickly, offering too many incentives, and Japan just very much doubts the sincerity of North Korea's outreach.
You agree with that?
I would say that the reaction of the Japanese government is that much strong, but maybe we are Japan is on the same page with the United States, so we want South Korea to adjust the speed, of the reconciliation, with
That's a different way of saying, basically agreeing with them. Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions that we finish over there. Yep.
Again to Professor Ren, going off a previous question, especially about the Chinese base in Djibouti now. Chinese base in Djibouti means that they are now closer to the headquarters of an American fleet, obviously American Fifth Fleet headquartered in Bahrain, than they've ever been before. Chinese warships engaging with pirates would now put them in closer proximity with American warships than, again, they've ever been headquartered before. Wouldn't this then lead to a possibility of further conflict, even accidental?
Well, we all know that the United States has so many military bases throughout the world. U.S. has troops in so many countries. Why do you have to worry about that? Only one Chinese military base in one country.
Right. Final question to you. Yeah. And please take the microphone kind of closer.
I will. This is for Professor Ren. It was mentioned earlier that North Korea will not give up its nuclear arsenal unless and until it can be assured of its security. Given your proximity, your common border, what is China prepared to do in terms of defense to persuade North Korea to make that move?
To persuade what?
To persuade North Korea to give its nuclear weapons. How much pressure is China prepared to put onto North Korea to achieve that?
Well, I have to say that the goal of denuclearization cannot be achieved only through China's efforts. It can only be achieved when other countries work together, when the international society makes effort. So my argument is that U.S., China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, China, we should join hands to make efforts together to encourage Kim Jong-un to move in the direction of denuclearization, which will take quite some time to materialize. It will be a process for North Korea to move in that direction. We have to encourage and induce them to continue this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask the very final question. What keeps you up at night in terms of international relations? What is the most dangerous situation you fear, which may be around, something you are really deeply concerned about in terms of international relations now?
Not only Asia, that's throughout the world.
Well, if you like.
Probably, the answer for Asia, course, the North Korean nuclear energy, the direction, okay, the direction of the current talk is a very concern because there is no guarantee that this is successful. And one major concern I have is actually why we are seeing some sort of impasse between the US and North Korea. The North Korea is constantly increasing their nuclear material as nuclear weapons. And very recently, the CSIS in Washington DC came up with information that there are this much missile capabilities at the North Korean side. So time is not necessarily on our side. And once Mr. Trump believes that he was betrayed, this is not be fair, to what direction the current process is going. I'm very much concerned.
Okay, thank you. Emma.
I think the biggest concern for me right now, this is not really particularly germane to this panel, but international meddling in democratic elections, I think is a great threat to the international rules-based order that we have basically more or less kept the peace since World War II.
Thank you. You're not concerned? That's right. And what about environmental issues? That's also something to worry about, I think. Well, let me thank our three panelists, Emma, Xiao, and Tai, for coming and talking to us today. And thank you very much for staying until the very end. This is our final event for this semester. We will convene again in early February. And until then, have a good Christmas, a good New Year's Eve, and a great holiday. Thanks for coming, and thank you again.